Ever wondered what could possibly make a place so scary that people just up and vanish overnight?
Here are the terrifying reasons why these towns were abandoned.
Dudley Town is known as one of the most haunted places in the United States. It's an abandoned settlement in Cornwall, Connecticut, and it's completely off limits to visitors, not just to protect the land from the vandals, but to protect outsiders from what may be lurking inside. At least that's what some say. It was first settled in the 1740s by several members of the Dudley family, who turned the forest into farmland. But after some time, Dudley Town emptied out. Now, it probably helps that Dudley Town sits in a valley called Dark Entry Forest, but there are said to have been all sorts of unfortunate and dark events that led to the place becoming a ghost town. And apparently it all stems from a curse the Dudley family brought with them from England. The legend goes they were distant relatives of Edmund Dudley, a nobleman who was executed for treason during King Henry VII's reign. And ever since his death, his entire line was to be met with misfortune. And life in Dudley Town was by no means easy. Crop failure, mysterious deaths and disappearances, and madness plagued the villagers. As people started leaving the small settlement, the handful that chose to stay were said to have slowly lost their minds, becoming more and more disconnected with reality, seeing and hearing things that may or may not have actually been there, before drifting into the forest, never to be seen again. And some say their maddened spirits still roam the valley to this day.
The ghost town of Oradour-Sur-Glane, France, comes with one of the most tragic backstories you can imagine, because on June 10th, 1994, the town was invaded upon by extremist German World War II soldiers, which I cannot outright name due to YouTube's guidelines, but I think you know what I mean. When the soldiers arrived, an air of merciless evil arrived with them. They rounded up the entire population of the town, 655 people, many of whom were refugees, doing their absolute best to actively avoid the war. The men were forced into 6 barns and put to death by firing squad, and the women were locked inside of the village church, while soldiers threw grenades through the window. Anyone who attempted to escape the flames quickly became the target of projectile weapons. When all was said and done, 643 people died. Only 6 men and 1 woman managed to escape the barns and church alive, and a mere 15 had avoided capture altogether. The ruined village was abandoned and later declared a national monument to serve as a reminder of the brutality faced during the Second World War and the resilience of the civilian people.
An entire city in China's Gansu province has sat abandoned for decades. It was once home to nearly 100,000 people or more, but even then it couldn't be found on any map, and it didn't have a name, just a code, 404. It was an entire city that finished construction in 1958, but it was kept completely hidden from the outside world, and that's because it housed some of the country's top nuclear scientists, along with doctors, mechanics, staff, and their families, all who'd been transferred there to begin work on a nuclear bomb. 6 years after it was built, China successfully detonated its first nuclear bomb in the Gobi Desert, not too far from 404. Now, 404 had everything a regular city would: its own government, police force, TV station, courthouse, and prison. It wasn't just above ground either. There was a whole underground defense system set up in case of nuclear war. And after the years, the city started to fall apart. By 2006, there were large-scale cave-ins, making it too dangerous to stay, so most of the people were relocated.
The small town of Kantubek on Vozrozhdeniya Island in Uzbekistan was originally built to house 15,000 people, the majority of which were scientists working at the infamous Aralsk 7 lab located in the center of the island, and their families. The lab operated for the majority of the Cold War and was, at the time, the largest biological warfare testing facility in the world. But bigger doesn't always mean better. The biosecurity of the lab was inadequate at best. In 1971, a failed smallpox test infected 10 people, killed 3, and almost started a worldwide epidemic that could have killed millions. Luckily, that didn't happen, but it was quite a close call. A year after the incident, 2 fishermen assumed to have been infected with the bubonic plague that somehow found its way out of the facility were found dead, and shortly after that, fishermen began began pulling up entire nets filled with dead fish. And shortly after that, 15,000 antelope grazing near the town collapsed and died. During this time, the town had also become a dumping ground for anthrax. The lab officially shut down in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union. And then, concerned for the safety of the world, if any bioweapons remaining on the island were to end up in the wrong hands, the United States government funded a cleanup project of the island in 2002. Still, the island remains incredibly dangerous to this day, and for the most part, off limits. There have only been a handful of expeditions there since then, and those who have gone have done so decked out in head-to-toe hazmat suits and breathing apparatuses, and pumped full of antibiotics. Safety first.
Kuldhara is an abandoned village in Rajasthan, India. It was once home to the Paliwal Brahmins, but by the 19th century, something happened that made everyone pack up and leave, never to return. As for what that was, nobody knows for sure, but there are legends. One local legend goes that a cruel and powerful minister had his eye on a beautiful girl from the town. He wanted to marry her, but she didn't want to marry him. The minister was so relentless in his pursuit, though, that the villagers, fearing what kind of wrath that this powerful man was going to bring down on the village, they decided to flee, but not before cursing the land so that no one could ever live there again. Today, Kuldhara is still deserted, but visitors who decide to explore the ruins sometimes come back with stories about strange noises, eerie shadows, and an oppressively dark presence lingering in the abandoned homes and buildings. Some even claim to have seen ghostly figures wandering around. And some believe the curse is real and that the spirits of the villagers protect their home from anyone who tries to settle there again.
Kiyikoi Turkey, also referred to by its Greek name Levissi and formerly known as Karmelesso, was once home to a thriving population of Greek Orthodox Christians and Anatolian Muslims. The two lived peacefully amongst one another, socializing on a day-to-day basis, partaking in each other's celebrations, and even coming to each other's aid in times of need. But all that changed in 1923 as the Greco-Turkish War came to an end, and Muslim troops were ordered to charge the village and open fire on Greeks, Armenians, and other Christian minorities. Furthermore, as part of a population exchange, 6,500 Christians were thrown out of their homes and forced to migrate to Greece, after which Muslim farmers living in Greece came to the town to replace the Christian population. But they struggled to cultivate the land and left soon after. In 1957, an earthquake came through and devastated the town beyond repair, leading to any remaining inhabitants abandoning the area. In 1988, the town was declared an archaeological site by the Turkish government. Today, two deteriorating Greek Orthodox churches still stand, along with several roofless homes that serve as a reminder of the town's tragic past.
Portlock, Alaska used to be a small but busy town in the early 1900s, mostly populated by fur traders and folks who worked in the nearby cannery. By 1951, though, the town had completely emptied out. It was in the 40s where things had started to take a turn. Residents began disappearing. According to locals, a creature called Nantinak, a Bigfoot-like beast, was stalking the area. Hunters would go into the woods and then never come back. Sometimes their bodies would be found, but they'd be mangled beyond recognition. People would hear strange noises coming from the forest at night, and there were even multiple sightings of something large and hairy moving among the trees. Nobody felt safe, not even in their homes. Even today, very few visit the area, and not just because of how hard it is to get to, but because of the fear that whatever haunted Portlock back then might still be lurking in the shadows today.
Located in Transylvania's Carpathian Mountains in Romania, the once humble town of Geamana sits completely abandoned due to this orange lake. Prior to 1977, the town was home to about 400 families, 1,000 people living peacefully amongst one another and enjoying the serenity of the simple life. But everything changed when the communist regime, led by dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, took over the area after learning about the copper reserves hiding in the nearby Rozia-Poieni mine. The very small town became a runoff basin for the copper mine's toxic waste, and soon Geamana became submerged in a toxic cocktail of heavy metals that seeped into the surrounding grasslands, making the area completely uninhabitable. Furthermore, for miles around, soil and groundwater became poisoned in what is now known as one of Europe's worst ecological disasters to date. Although one of the preconditions of the mining effort included a thorough cleanup of the valley, the toxicity of the lake, which continues to generate highly corrosive corrosive sulfuric acid and trivalent iron continues to spread into the surrounding valley.
Bodie, California is not only a ghost town, but a supposedly cursed ghost town. But even if you don't believe in all the curses and stuff, the place has a very interesting history. Back in the day, it was a bustling Wild West town. There were about 65 saloons, that's a lot of saloons, hotels, a red light district, and even a Chinatown. And it had a population of 8,000 to 10,000 people. And like many Wild West towns, miners had flocked there in search of gold nearby. The town was also known for its danger. There was tons of gambling, bar fights, and shootouts. The place was so notorious that the term Bad Man of Bodie was used across California just to describe someone with an especially bad temper. But by the late 1880s, people started trickling out of Bodie. Today, it's been preserved as a historic park. But it's rumored that taking any artifacts from the site will bring bad luck. Rangers even get letters and packages from people trying to return the items that they took after having bad luck, or in some cases, even disturbing paranormal experiences.
Wittenoom in Western Australia was once home to 20,000 residents, 2 schools, a cinema, and even a fancy hotel. But unbeknownst to residents, the town also housed its own destruction. The town was built in 1947, and by the early 1960s, it seemed like a great place to live and work. Here's the thing, the town was built for a reason, and that was to house miners working in the nearby asbestos mines. At the time, the dangers of asbestos were not yet known, and it was a lucrative business, so people were blissfully unaware that the very thing supporting their livelihood would eventually end their lives. When the dangers of working with asbestos eventually came to light in the mid-1960s, the mine was shut down, but the town remained until the late 1970s. To date, more than 2,000 former residents of Wittenoom have died from asbestos-related diseases, a number predicted to rise in coming years. The majority of buildings in the town were demolished back in the 1980s and 90s, but surprisingly, a few residents still remained in Wittenoom, commonly referred to as Australia's Chernobyl, up until 2022, when a bill was passed allowing for the forcible eviction of any remaining residents. Today, the town sits as a completely empty reminder of the risks of the mining business and the dangers of asbestos.
All right, folks, we will catch you in the very next video.
Cheers, friends. Stay out of these towns.